And welcome to Creator Weekly Live for January 14th, 2024. I'm Peggy Kay, and today I have updates for YouTube and live streaming, for website owners, and I thought I would mention just a little bit about changes coming to Google Assistant and what that might mean. So thank you for joining me live today. If you're in the live chat, I'd love to know where you are today and how your weekend's going and what your weather is like. I see Diego's already posted that. Very rainy weather. It was windy last night and lost power. That's a lot more extreme weather than where I was. It was rainy. We didn't lose power or anything. I hear there's terrible storms across the US this past week. So I hope that you are doing well if that affects you. Those of us here in California, we have some bad weather, but nothing quite as extreme as what I'm seeing in the Midwest and the Northeast and the Northwest. We're kind of in a bubble here. All right, so let me get started. The first thing I want to mention is that if you are using AdSense to monetize your own website on January 16th, just a couple days, Google is going to stop serving ads to the European Economic Area and UK unless you have set up a consent management platform that shows a GDPR compliant consent message. Now, if you have been monetizing your website with AdSense, you should have received email notifications about this and seen a banner in your AdSense account. Excuse me, just a moment while I take a sip of water. So hopefully you have dealt with this already. Google has its own consent management platform. You can choose to use that, and you can easily configure it in your AdSense account. Just to double check, you can sign into your AdSense account, click Privacy and Messaging on the left menu, then under European regulations, click Manage, and then you can see what you have set up for your AdSense account. Now, if you set up in the settings there that Google is allowed to show something on your behalf, if you haven't configured a message, then you should be good to go. But I think it's good to check the message settings, make sure the message says what you want it to say. It's especially tricky for those of us who are not in Europe because we obviously don't see this message when we visit our own sites. So it's important to check this in your AdSense settings. And just to point out, this is for AdSense for content. When you have AdSense ads on your own website, this is also for AdMob if you're monetizing an app, and Google Ad Manager. It does not affect you if you're using AdSense for your YouTube channel, because people are not going to your own website, they're going to YouTube, and presumably Google has implemented these consent management messages for their own sites. So that's the first thing I wanted to talk about. The next thing I wanted to talk about is a really neat update for podcasters. Now, as you're probably aware, YouTube is going to be the home of podcasts for Google. Google Podcasts is going to shut down, and you can actually move your podcasts that you're subscribed to YouTube Music. That migration process is available right now in the US only, I think, but it will be expanding to everyone because Google Podcasts will be shut down. This latest update is for podcasters. Now, one of the advantages of having a podcast is that it generates a feed, and then you can add that feed to a bunch of different platforms so that your podcast can be available wherever people are listening, rather than them having to go to one particular site. So now YouTube allows podcasters to import their own RSS feed for their podcast. If you are going to do that, you should definitely read the information in the YouTube Help Center about best practices, because one of the important things is that you are not allowed to import a podcast that has advertisements burned in. So, it's a regular ad, it's burned in. That's not allowed. If you are reading a promotion as the host of the podcast, that is allowed, but you have to declare that there's paid promotion. So that is something you need to look into before you import your audio podcasts into YouTube. You can also select which episodes to import, and just be aware also that what happens is that you import your podcast feed. These are audio episodes. YouTube makes a video out of them, and those videos will show on the video tab of your channel as new imports, as newly uploaded. So just be aware that that's how it's going to happen. Is this worthwhile for podcasters to do this? I would hope so. I'm not sure that people will necessarily take to audio-only episodes, but if you have a feed anyway, it might be worth doing that. Craig says he rarely listens to podcasts. I rarely listen to podcasts also, so I'm obviously biased. I do watch clips from podcasts on YouTube. Those are not just audio, though. Those are usually actually videos. So a lot of podcasters record their audio podcast. They record video at the same time and show that on YouTube. That's pretty nice as a viewer. That obviously is a lot more work, though, if you're just normally an audio podcaster. Mhm. I also wanted to mention an update on YouTube for their harassment and cyberbullying policies. And I'm kind of mentioning this because I find it a little shocking they had to make this policy change. But if you go in the list of things that are not allowed, I am having trouble finding harmful conspiracy theories. You can't have content that threatens an identifiable individual. You can't mock the death or serious injury of an identifiable individual. Here we go. So the new policy that's just been added is that you're not allowed to have content that realistically simulates deceased minors or victims of deadly or well-documented major violent events describing their death or violence experienced. And I read this and I think, what are they actually talking about here? There's got to be some background. And from what I've read elsewhere is that this is sort of a new thing in true crime kind of content, where they show, a realistic looking depiction of the person who was affected by the violence, narrating the violence against them. So describing their own death in detail or describing the violence against them. It sounds really disturbing. And this is not allowed under YouTube's policies. I think it's interesting if you look at the policies, there's a whole bunch of examples, and each of those came up because there's someone out there making videos with that kind of content, which is really kind of terrible. So those are the major updates for YouTube and AdSense. I wanted to also mention there's this nice video on Creator Insider talking about best practices for live streaming. It has a lot of tips right from the horse's mouth. These are actually good tips if you're live streaming even someplace other than YouTube. So they talk about scheduling and events and things that you can do. I definitely recommend you check it out if you live stream or are thinking about live streaming. And as another update, StreamYard now lets you live stream in portrait mode. This is the latest thing. YouTube is going to start promoting this in the shorts feed, vertical live streaming, like you're holding your mobile phone, but a bunch of platforms for live streaming from desktop now let you stream vertically. So StreamYard lets you, what I'm using right now, which is Talk Studio from Streamlabs, lets you choose vertical video. Restream lets you do that. So the idea is that you can have the benefit of vertical live streaming, maybe get a promo in the YouTube Shorts feed, but you can do it from desktop where you have a lot more controls for things like screen sharing and so forth. So those are some major updates this week. The last thing video related that I wanted to mention is this nice little update for Google Drive. If you upload videos to Google Drive, particularly for collaborating, or for example, if you're recording your Google Meet meeting, the video goes to Google Drive directly. You can now share a link to that video in Google Drive with a timestamp. So, you want to say, oh, check out this portion of the video. You can then create a link that goes directly to that part of the video. People don't have to scan through it. It's just a nice sort of improved quality of life. I think it makes using Google Drive easier for collaborating on videos. So we're moving pretty well today, getting through a lot of updates. The next thing I want to do is shift a little bit to talk about websites. Google made an announcement that websites made with Google business profiles will be turned off soon. This is for businesses in what used to be called Google My Business, now Google Business Profiles. They let business owners create a very simple one-page website. That way you didn't have to have Facebook as your website. You could have your own. Google has decided to turn these off. What they will be doing is redirecting the Google business site to your Google business profile. They will do that for several months. I think it starts in March and it goes to July. And after that, the page just won't work anymore. So if you have a business using one of these Google business profile sites, you need to move it somewhere else. I think it's really kind of an interesting tool that Google didn't really build up. This seems very Google-ish. Mike Blumenthal, who is a Google business profile expert, has a write-up on this. This feature was aimed mostly at businesses in places like India and Indonesia and Brazil. This is for business owners who don't have the money or desire or technical skills to make their own website. And so this has let them set up things really easily. And as Mike points out, this was an innovative, well-targeted product that never left version 1 in 7 years of existence. Like many Google products, it failed from what seems to be intentional neglect, and it was underdeveloped. And as he pointed out, back in 2017, when these launched, for a business to build a strategic asset like a website takes faith in Google that I'm not sure that they have earned. And, I think that is unfortunately something that happens over and over again. Google makes a business decision to remove a feature, and if you spent a lot of time building that up, you lose it. So I think for businesses, it's so important to have your own domain. You should have a website. It doesn't have to be fancy. A single page that says your website, the location, what services or products you offer, if it's a restaurant, a menu, your open hours. That's all you need. It should be on your domain. So that way, if whatever platform you're using to make your site stops supporting it, you can recover easily because you just go to a different platform. It has the same link. So that is my lesson for the day. I also wanted to mention an interesting article. It's actually kind of fancy formatting on The Verge. This has got a lot of people talking about how Google shapes the web. Now, their premise is that because websites want to be ranked well in Google Web Search, Google's webmaster guidelines are actually shaping what you see when you go on the web. So websites make design decisions and content decisions and formatting decisions based on what they think Google wants. And there's been a lot of pushback on this from Google and from people who are experts in search engine optimization kind of things. I think what's interesting, though, is they're both right. So Google says, look, we don't require an author byline. We don't require people to use a particular format. But I think that misses what The Verge's article is saying, because it's not necessarily that Google is requiring these things. It's that people believe Google is requiring these things that makes them make certain design decisions. And there's a bit of nuance there, I think, but I feel like there's a lot of talking past each other where the team at The Verge is saying, people really think this, people really design their sites based on what they think Google wants. And Google is saying, that's not what we want. Okay, so the problem is Google is not doing a good job clearly telling website owners, you need to do this, you need to do that. And I think it's not surprising that people use the guidelines that Google gives as some sort of Bible where they need to follow it exactly. I think it's something that Google should address, and maybe they need better education, better information, but there's always going to be SEO gurus out there who are going to tell people you need to do it exactly like this, have 5,000 words or 6 pictures or whatever the latest flavor of advice is. And website owners don't know. It's the same with the Google business sites. A lot of people, a lot of businesses wants to have a website without the expertise, and there's a lot of bad information out there. So I'll just throw that out there as something that's being discussed this week. All right, let me switch gears just a little bit and talk about Google Assistant. Now, one of the things that seems to happen a lot, not surprising to any of you out there who use Google products, features that aren't used enough get removed. And this can be really frustrating if you use those features, especially since Google is so huge. You're talking billions of users. And so if only 1% of a billion users use a feature, that's still what, 10 million users? I may have done my math wrong, but still. So even if it's just a tiny percentage of users who use something, it's still a lot of people. And Google has a habit of making a big splash about new features. So for example, I think this was back in 2017. Oh, you can use Google Assistant to guide you through using a recipe. Oh, it will tell you step by step, it will tell you the ingredients, and so forth. Now, this week they announced we're going to be removing a bunch of features. Here's a link to the Help Center article. So it's not even right up front what they're going to be removing. Instead, you have to go to the Help Center article. It lists the changes they're making to Google Assistant. And if you go through the list, there's 17 features being removed. And if you go through the whole list, what you will see is that they are removing the feature to follow recipes. If I can, there you go. So it says they're going to be removing the option to access or manage your cookbook, transfer recipes from device to device, play an instructions recipe video, or show step-by-step recipes. I mean, you can use Google Assistant to search for recipes across the web and YouTube, but that obviously is not the same thing as being guided through the recipe step by step. So you have big splash, here's a great feature, then very quietly, oh, we're going to take that away. I assume that means that not many people were using this feature, but it's a bummer for people who do. And I'll say that among all the assistant features listed, I don't think there's any that I've regularly used. The change I'm going to miss, though, is that on your device, if you're in the Google app or if you have a Pixel device, the Pixel search bar, there's a little microphone icon. You could use that to trigger Google Assistant. I used to do that all the time because I live in a household with Google devices. We have a Google Home. Other people in the household have Android phones. So if I say the trigger words, which I'm not going to say because it will trigger all my devices, it's okay. And then, Google. So on my phone, I would often just push the little microphone icon that would trigger Assistant, and I could ask it to do something like turn off the lights or whatever. What they're changing now is that little microphone will no longer trigger the assistant. Instead, it triggers just doing search, so you can't actually use it for a lot of assistant tasks. What's happening here? I think the other thing that is in the mix is that Google had big layoffs this past week or so, and a lot of those layoffs apparently were in the divisions that work on Assistant. Again, not a surprise there. But I think part of this is a shift to using their AI, the large language models, and so forth. And I guess they're not going to just incorporate Bard or whatever language model into Assistant again. They're going to redesign the whole thing. Maybe something better will come of it. Maybe it won't. But I think that, again, this is something that happens all the time. Features with a big splash, and then nothing. So those are the updates for this week. I'll just leave you with something that you can look at yourself. And let me find the correct tab. There is now a website for Google's AI tools. It's at labs.google, labs.google. And it's a website that has a bunch of their AI features you can try. I just want to show how crazy this website looks. I'm going to refresh the page. And look at that. You see all the following things, and it kind of, I don't know, the page looks crazy to me. Personally, I like just a nice little list. If you scroll down, it's a more standard page, their latest experimental tools and technology. Say what you see, Duet AI, Text FX. So if you're interested in using Google's AI tools, check this out, labs.google. It's got a lot of fun things to try, and some of them may actually make it into the Google products that you regularly use. Diego says, I will miss Jamboard. A lot of users are supporting a petition online. Yeah, so talking about products Google is shutting down. Jamboards were really cool. They were hardware touchscreens. I guess they are hardware touchscreens. And then there is a web version, jamboard.google.com. So this is a whiteboarding tool. You can collaborate. It's really kind of neat. And Google will be shutting it down by the end of the year. Unfortunately, I think it's unfortunate because Jamboard was integrated with Google's products. Now, Google has said they will be incorporating third-party whiteboarding tools into Google Meet and other products, but it's not the same thing. So don't become reliant on anything in particular. You've got to be platform agnostic and willing to change. It's really not fun. So those are the updates for this week. Thank you so much for joining me live. I will see you next Sunday. Have a great week.